All right, so the first thing we need to do is learn how to include Bootstrap. Just like we would include a style sheet in our own documents, just like we've been doing. Like I have an app.css, right? We include a link to app.css. That's essentially the same thing that we're going to do, but instead of a style sheet I'm writing, it's going to be a style sheet from Bootstrap. Now, there's a little bit more to it because Bootstrap actually does come with some JavaScript too, but the core mechanic, the most important piece, is a single style sheet. So if we go to the documentation here, and you go to, where is it? Getting started, introduction, here we go. There's a couple different options for how we include the Bootstrap style sheets and the JavaScript scripts. One option is to download everything onto our machine and link to it just like we do here. App.css, that exists on my computer, and I'm linking to it using a link tag, and it needs to be in the same folder, or it needs to be, accessible. I need to write the correct path to find that file. The other option, and there's nothing wrong with downloading, by the way, but the easier option to get started right now is to use something called a CDN. CDN stands for, I think is it Content Delivery Network, or Distribution Network. It's essentially a hosted version of a style sheet that we can access remotely. I don't have to download it on my machine. So if I copy this link right here, you'll see it's a link tag. It has an href, but this time the href is to an actual website. And I can actually go to that URL. And this is a very large style sheet. It's been compressed down, so all the white space and everything is removed. But you can see definitely CSS in there, right? We've got text decoration, border radius, font family, different things that we recognize. It's just a massive chunk of CSS. So I can just link to this URL, and that will download the correct script that I need. So I'm going to copy that entire thing from Bootstrap. A couple things just to note, there are different versions. As of recording, I'm on 4.5. If there's 4.5 point something or 4.6, the differences are not going to be very large. Now, if you're on version 3 point something, that is significantly different. So do worry about that. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. You can also click that button, and I'm going to put this in my document in the head, and I'm going to put it before my custom style sheet, my app.css. That way I can write my own styles, and they won't be undone or overwritten by Bootstrap, or they have a better chance of not being overwritten. For example, if Bootstrap makes all H1s 50 pixels, which it doesn't, but if it did, here I might make them 40 pixels, and this will win. Okay, so if we refresh the page, we shouldn't see anything, but if I add some content in here, I'll just do some placeholder stuff. Placeholder H1, maybe a paragraph with some lorem, and I guess we'll just start with that. If I refresh, it doesn't look like much, but this is different than our normal default style sheet. So if I comment out the Bootstrap link, I'm just going to delete that for a moment, or comment out both lines, and I refresh, we notice different fonts. Hopefully you saw that. And some of the margin and padding is different. Now that's not all that important. We can change all of this, of course, but this does tell us that Bootstrap is working. Now, the other thing we should mention, there are these scripts from the quick start, these three script tags. We have not really covered scripts at all, but of course we will, that we do need to include if we want access to every part of Bootstrap. So certain components require JavaScript, and we can see them here. If we want an image carousel, if we want the collapsible navbar, if we want tooltips and popovers, if we want drop-down menus, we're going to need these scripts. So you don't need them for buttons and the grid system and all of that. But just to be comprehensive here, I'm going to put them in there. And again, we haven't talked about scripts, but we just copy these, and I'm going to put these at the very bottom, right before the closing body tag. And we'll learn more about why we do that later. But honestly, it's just copying and pasting at this point. So we shouldn't see anything different. Okay, so that's what we need to do to get set up with Bootstrap. Every time you want to use it, you need that CSS file. Remember, it's just a CSS file written by someone else or by a team, and it's hosted online, but you can download it. Definitely, you can download it. It's just a little bit more annoying when you're starting out. But the advantage, of course, is that you have that on your machine. There's a world where this could go down. This URL might change, or the hosting might just disappear overnight, and it doesn't exist anymore, and our file is gone. So for a real production application, I would definitely download it. Anyway, we now have Bootstrap, I don't want to say installed, but we have it included in this document. So now let's take a look at our first component, our first piece of Bootstrap syntax. We saw that there are some default changes, the default font changes, the size or the margin and padding on certain elements changes, but most of what we do in Bootstrap is enacted through classes. So every component that we see here, let's take a look at, dropdown. If you look at how it works, we're writing a bunch of class equals something. Lots of classes often. And these are all classes that have been predefined in our Bootstrap or in Bootstrap's style sheet. As we saw, there's a lot of classes in there. Just like I can define my own class in here called, button, and then make everything red, or change the font size, and then I can use that in my markup. We're doing the same thing, it's just we didn't write those classes. So the first element that we'll look at, or the first component rather, is under layout. It's a very simple one, but a very important one. It's called a container. So a container, as they say here, is the most basic layout element in Bootstrap, and it's required when you use the grid system. We'll get to the grid system. So what a container does is that they contain and pad content within them. Basically, it's a quick way to get some space and contain your content. Right now, our content goes all the way across the screen, and usually that's not what we want for a website. We might have different pieces of content, right? It doesn't just go all the way across. So the container class, the simplest possible container, gives us a responsive fixed width container. And we'll talk about what that means, but let's just try it now. So class equals container. Now this does not have to be a div, by the way, but the docs do use divs a lot. So I'm going to do that here, dot container tab, or if you don't want to use Emmet, just div with a container class. And then I'm going to close that around all of my content. Not the scripts. I mean, it won't make a huge difference, but they don't need to be in there. And I'm going to refresh. Okay, so what do we see? Well, there's a bunch of margin now around my content. And as I resize, you'll see that that space does change, right? There's breakpoints in here. So it starts to shrink down, and then there's a specific, where are you? Right there, breakpoint, and then there's another one right there, and then there's another one right there. And those breakpoints are predefined. You can see them here actually as part of Bootstrap. These are very common. So there's different sizes. Extra small, which is anything under 576. We've got small, medium, large, extra large. We'll come back to these when we learn more about the grid system. But another thing I'll show you is container fluid. And container fluid is going to be a full width container, and it will span the entire width of the viewport. So basically all the way across. Unlike what we have here, this container doesn't go all the way across except when we're on small screens, or I guess extra small right there. So I'm going to change this to container-fluid, just so you can see this. And now, as I resize, I've already refreshed, our container goes all the way across the screen the entire time. There's still some margin, so it's not like there's no container at all. It still makes a difference compared to what we had without the container, but certainly it's not the same as just container. And then the last thing I'll show you is that there are actually these responsive versions, container-small, medium, large, and extra large. And what these will do is allow us to say we want the container to be all the way across the screen, 100% wide, until you hit the small breakpoint or the large or the extra large. So I'll show you that very quickly. Let's do medium. So we start all the way across the screen, all the way across, and then we're going to hit that breakpoint right there. And now it goes back to acting like the original container, just a plain container. So this is getting a bit in the weeds, but I didn't want to have to make a separate video around containers. They're very simple, and for the most part, we're just going to use container or container fluid, and the default container, as you can see here, is full width on very small screens, and then it adds a bunch of margin on other sizes. So we're going to always work within a container. You don't have to for most of Bootstrap, but for the grid system, you do need to work in a container. All right, so that is the basic idea of setting up Bootstrap, and then probably the most boring component, but an essential one, the container, just class equals container. Next up, we'll talk about buttons and colors and a whole bunch of other stuff.